And welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are going to take a look at Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, one of the big quote unquote summer blockbuster hits. His Moviness is very eager to offer his take, given he has been a huge fan of the previous Indiana Jones movies, i.e.,
Some
the
of
good
them.
ones. But before we dive in,
was it actually a big? You said it's a big hit. Was it actually a big hit? Thinking back on it, did it flop?
I'm using air quotes here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Visually, I didn't feel those air quotes, so thank you for specifying. Okay, so all right, Thank you. That just went over my head. So,
well, before we go any further, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And we are on Spotify now, so be sure to check us out there. And we will eventually be uploading all of our previous episodes on other podcasting platforms. So remember to subscribe to stay up to date. And I will be dropping updates as we go along to let you know which of the latest platform we are going to be on. We're projecting to go on Apple Podcasts next, but that's not a complete assurance. So we'll be working on that as the year progresses.
you can't escape us. We're everywhere.
Exactly. And we're also going to be at the Carolina Renaissance Festival in November, where his Moviness will be in his full papal regalia. So if you do see a man with a blockbuster box and a Pope outfit, be sure to come up to him and say hi. That's the movie Pope. And if you see a soldier standing next to him, that's me. I'm his bodyguard.
Thank you. Glad that I can have some extra protection there.
But before we dive in, how's your week been so far, Lee? I heard a few days ago you were on your way to Maine to cause some flood and rain. What's going on with that?
That's a hurricane reference. It's going to be amazing how quickly that joke falls between the wayside because everyone's be like, "What Hurricane Lee?" Because I don't think anything's going to happen. But yeah, it sounds like the hurricane named after me is maybe causing some issues. But I think everyone's going to forget about that by the end of next week. So.
Well, you're a very popular man. I mean, you're a bushwhacker, you're a lord, you're the movie pope, and now you're a hurricane. So we can only go, up from there. But how's your week been so far, Lee?
Good, no complaints. Like I said, I got a chance to. Like I said, I watched the Indiana Jones movie maybe a few weeks ago, but I did end up rewatching it this week because I wanted to kind of have like a second look at it, like after kind of like everything's died down a little bit, just to kind of get a better feel for it. And I hate to say this, I thought it kind of got worse on a second viewing, so I'm gonna be very curious how the whole discussion goes, because I was kind of thinking that it would have maybe subsided a little bit, but no, it just kind of felt like more holes got poked into it. So we'll have to see how everything goes.
And I watched on Thursday, so I blocked out 2 hours where I watched that. Well, attempted to watch the movie, and there were large parts of it where I kind of just zoned out because I was like, they really aren't going anywhere. There's nothing that's adding to the story, but we'll get into that. So in case anybody doesn't know, rolling eye emoji. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny came out a few months ago during the summer. I think it was in July, and this was the fifth installment of the of the franchise. Mm-hmm. And we basically see an older Indiana Jones being pulled back into action by the daughter of an old acquaintance to locate the Dial of Destiny, the Antiqualia. I believe I'm saying that right, which is an artifact that was created by Archimedes of Syracuse. For starters, can I just say, out of all of the devices that they could have had in the movie, this was the most subpar and the most ridiculous.
I mean, as far as what it does, I don't know. There was a crystal skull in it that was an alien skull, so I don't know how I would quite describe. I don't know how I would quite work those devices in the tier list of what is the most absurd. versus
the,
not. I mean,
the crystal skull, I'm more ready to accept than a dial that got broken in half. And it doesn't really it doesn't open anything. All it does is just predict time fissures. That's pretty much it.
yes, and there's kind of an asterisk next to that because it really, well, I guess we'll get into that, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was in the previous installments, right? They're a lot more tangible, which, like I said, even if they're super bizarre, like the Ark of the Covenant, like, we saw it,
Mhm.
they kind of interacted with it, and like we kind of know there's like an air of mystery around it. So even though it's like totally absurd that like you open it and people like get their flesh sucked off and everything, lightning bolts come out and everything like that. There's all this bizarre stuff, but it was like a tangible thing that was there. And I guess as far as like this one goes, it's just as odd, but I think what it does is maybe weirder than all of them, but maybe not necessarily the oddest of the group. But I don't know. I think to me, Crystal Skull really takes the cake with just having this really absurd alien plot that's just feels so not Indiana Jones. I know it always dipped into, kind of this, not really something that we see in our kind of reality, but I don't know. Aliens felt like it took the cake. This one feels like it's still very bizarre, but not as bizarre as Alien. So,
Because like in the previous Indiana Jones movies, barring Crystal Skull, they've all dealt into legends that people were familiar with, and and there's a lot of interest in, obviously like the Ark of the Covenant the or the Holy Grail. But
yeah.
like in the previous two movies, we're talking about legends and artifacts that unless unless you're really really into this kind of stuff, this would fly over your head.
Oh, for sure. I mean, at least Archimedes is a real person and not, an evil
Yeah.
ET. So I will say that. At least they pick something that I can be like, okay, at least I can understand what we're trying to go for in this.
So let's go ahead and dive in. So Lee, what did you think of the of the movie? Because you said it got worse the second time you watched it.
Yes, I
Can
did.
you expound
So,
on that?
yeah, for sure. So, so you have like kind of the opening, right? And, I think it's enjoyable, if not a little bit, like I said, a little bit on the absurd side. And, we've kind of seen how they do openings in the previous one. This one was just a little bit kind of on the odd side. I did have fun with it, but like the whole thing where, you obviously have, and I guess we'll talk about right now, the de-aged Harrison Ford,
Yeah.
which at times looks good and other times looks really poor.
Did it remind you of the
And I
CGI
think
babies from The Flash, sort of?
not that bad, not not to that level of badness, but there were some sequences where it was noticeable. But I think when it's at night, you're not really seeing them very well in certain aspects. I can suspend my disbelief, but it definitely was a little distracting. But it just, to me, you just kind of have this like awkward sequence, right, where there's a giant bomb, like we see Indiana Jones captured, right, and he's about to be executed, and like literally a giant bomb just comes through the roof of the place they're at, and I'm just like, is this real? Like, is this really how we're opening the sequence with a giant bomb? And initially, it kind of like just kind of like thuds in the floor, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess it's kind of like humorous. Like, okay, let's see where this goes. And then it drops, and then it blows up, and like, I don't know, everyone else around him dies, but he's being, hung up, and he survives. I'm like, what? Like, this is just goofy now. Like, what am I looking at? Did he just really survive this bomb that literally went off like right on top of him? Like, I realized that maybe they're trying to make the whole bomb sequence in the Crystal Skull look less bizarre with him jumping in the fridge as a bomb goes off or hydrogen bomb.
Right.
But then in this, it's just like, cool, we'll just have a bomb kind of go off a few floors below him, and he just kind of survives. And it was just like, no, it's like they're suspending disbelief, and then there's just kind of creating this weird narrative where things just are totally takes you out of the movie going experience.
Well, I mean,
I mean,
it also tries to make him look superhuman when you would
yes,
think a guy who's being suspended by his neck would be the first one to get burned because he can't move or anything. Because the
yeah,
soldiers, they would at least have a much better chance because they can I don't know, get out of the way. But they're the first ones to get roasted, and he's just somehow he just survives unsinged, or without even so much as having a smudge mark on his uniform.
yes, yes. It's just totally bizarre, and I guess like they kind of do because he's suspended. He's not like on the floor where everything breaks away, but even with that, it's just like it's barely it's barely something that registers as something that could realistically happen.
So I wanted to ask you, what did you think about the lance? Because I thought because I thought that was going to be the focus of the movie, and then they come out and say, oh well, it's just a fake. This is not what we're really after. After all,
yeah, it was an odd decision because I agree with you. Like the lance of Longine, something like that.
Longinus, yeah. It's the spear.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's
thank
it's
you.
the for those of y'all who don't those of y'all who don't know, the spear of Longinus is supposed to be a relic, that a weapon that pierced the side of Christ during the crucifixion, and legend goes that whoever holds it is invincible. And if we remember anything from the Hellboy movies, Hitler had access to it, which was why he was invincible for the first few years of the war, and then he lost it. Sorry, I just had to put that in there.
Thank you for that. Yes, and you're absolutely right, and definitely there are a few movies out there that do kind of talk about the spear of Christ, as I've heard it referred to as. But yeah, it was an odd decision, right? So I don't know what the purpose, like, I don't know. I guess because it's like a cold open, it just kind of is there more to get us like kind of this action sequence where you get Indiana Jones, fighting to find this. He comes to the conclusion that, oh, this is fake. And then we have that same conversation with Mads Mikkelsen, whose character name is Schmidt, right? Or I think he goes by Dr. Voller or something initially, but I'm just going to call him Schmidt because I think that's what it eventually comes to.
Yeah.
But it was odd, right? It felt like it was just a means to kind of have this whole like fight sequence, and that's pretty much it. Like they have this kind of like train fight where he's kind of going through, and I mean there is some tension there. I think they do a good job of that because obviously he's all dressed up in some Nazi uniform, and he's kind of stumbling through the train and trying to do all this stuff, and there is some tension where it's like, okay, he's trapped, or you think he's trapped, he's able to get out of it. So I think that was honestly probably the best part of the movie, and I hate to say that because we're literally in just a cold opening that makes little purpose to the overall story, but I think it was the best part of it. And then we kind of transitioned from the spear to talking about the dial of destiny that's made by Archimedes, and that's how we kind of I guess go through that whole sequence. And to me, it was fun, but it didn't feel like Indiana Jones. And I think that's the thing that kind of took me out of it. It just was a little bit too big of a spectacle. I think back to like the older movies, like Temple of Doom, right? Where, he's sitting there and, it's a very, maybe not plausible that like, this ancient civilization would be able to build this, but it's something that like, at least is like simple. This is very like, to me, over the top. You have this giant train and there's this, big gun that's shooting through the train. And I'm just like, it just feels like too much. So like, I like kind of the more simple things that they're capable of doing instead of making it this huge spectacle. So
because there just seems to be too much going on. I mean, you've got Indiana Jones trying to escape the train. You've got Baz who's been captured and he's trying to wriggle his way out. You've got the general who's pissed off that he doesn't have the real spear, and then you've got Voller who's like, oh well, actually we need the dial of destiny because we can win the war with mathematics and not superstition apparently. So so your mind's all over the place, and you can't and you can't figure out, well, what am I supposed to focus on here? You know?
Yeah, they're all over the place. So, but yeah, that was kind of like the cold opening, and as I said, I think that it does have some faults, but I thought it was honestly the best part of the film, and pretty much everything like from when we see kind of the old decrepit Indiana Jones on forward, it just kind of slowly went downhill from there.
I mean, yeah, I mean, which brings us to the quote unquote present, 1969, where we find Indiana Jones living alone. We learned that he's getting divorced from Marion, and he is retiring from Hunter College after X number of years, teaching there. And obviously, let's not forget he's dealing with the kids who are more interested in listening to the Beatles, getting high, and celebrating the fact that they landed on the moon. I mean, a part of me kind of feels for Indiana Jones, and a part of me is like, really, this is where you're going? You're just going to have him hang around with a bunch of shitheads? I mean, it made me think of when future Barry met past Barry in the Flash, and it was like, these guys are really, really annoying. Like, like how is he even putting up with this? But I'll let you dive further into that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it's like watching a really big character, like something like people, I think for the most part, really enjoy Indiana Jones, right? You want to see this guy, being this really charismatic self that he has. To see him in this like old, feeble shape is just not a good look for the character at all. And this is no slight against Harrison Ford. Like, I mean, the guy is like what, almost 80 now?
Yeah, but to portray him like that, it's depressing, because obviously this is a character who's influenced generations of filmmakers, writers, and actors. I mean, you can watch. Everything from Family Guy to South Park to, some of the directors of the Avengers films. I mean, they've been influenced by this, and it's just so depressing to see them portray him that way. You're wondering, is this even appropriate, or is there some sort of agenda that they're trying to push? They're like saying, see, like, even legend, we don't need legends like this, we can make our own legends or whatever.
Well, I really hope that's not what they're going for, because it was a pretty sad way to do it, because it just it kind of puts you in this frame of mind that it's like, am I going to really enjoy seeing this character be like this, right? Like, this is not how I want to see an interpretation of it. And it's weird. Like, I think The Crystal Skull was almost 15 years ago. And even back then, people were saying, like, gosh, like, he's kind of, old at this stage. Like, he's kind of up there in age. And then we fast forward to something 15 years later, and it's like, oh my gosh, like, I mean, let the poor man go out in the sunset. Like, it just was so... It was such a bizarre decision, but I
mean, they kind of did. They gave him a retirement party.
Yeah,
they got him
yes. Yeah.
So, so we get introduced to Helena, and after watching the movie, a part of me, there was a little voice in the back of my head that was asking, are they trying to set up Helena as the next Indiana Jones? And I'm thinking, oh God, I hope not, because the moment she spoke, and as the film progressed, I progressively grew to dislike her to the nth degree, because personally, I don't feel like she brings anything to the franchise, apart from just being this, the smart ass who thinks she's better than everybody, and figures, I can definitely put you in your place, because I know more about this. I've memorized 7 notebooks, and I know all these things more than. And I'm sorry, if she's supposed to be, the replacement to Indiana Jones, I'd rather take my business elsewhere, because there's nothing about her that makes me say she's a very sympathetic character, because she's basically an antiquarian thief, as you find out. But what did you think of Elena?
So I'm going to say I did not like her. She kind of grew on me a little bit as we went through. Not a ton, but I think, like, you know, she is at her core, right? She's just kind of this person that's out for herself.
Yeah.
And I do think there are a few moments that stick out where you kind of see her maybe, you know, seeing a different side of things. But I do agree with you. Like, overall, I was very indifferent to her character. You know, I would say I didn't have an issue with how Phoebe Waller-Bridge depicted her, because I think she did a good job of kind of balancing the tightrope of kind of being this really snarky person to kind of having like genuine moments of like sympathy and stuff like that. And you can kind of see as the story progresses, like, she clearly has more of a bond with Indiana Jones where she cares about his well-being. So there are some minor things that she does seem to pick up on, but I agree. And to your point about her being the next Indiana Jones, I totally agree with you. Would be a huge mistake. I have literally no stakes in seeing anything with her. And I think, like, if there was any type of TV show, offshoot movie, whatever you want to call it, I would have no interest in watching it at all. Unless, like, it's just something that everyone is making fun of, and then I'll watch it just to watch it and hate watch it with everybody else.
Yeah.
But it is something where I have literally no interest in it. She didn't do enough to really justify it in my mind. And like you pointed out, it is kind of awkward when you kind of create these characters that are maybe a little bit too good for what we see. And granted, I mean, Indiana Jones is kind of an odd character like that too, right? Like, you know, he kind of is an archaeologist, but he knows how to, you know, get into fist fights and, you know, good with weapons and stuff like that. So, I mean, there is a little bit of suspension of disbelief there with both of the characters. But, you know, I guess for us as like an audience, right, we've seen Indiana Jones do it for so many movies. To kind of see her kind of try to fill in that role does feel a little bit jarring. So I just, you know, nothing against the portrayal of the character, but just not anything that really resonates.
It's just the way that she was written, really.
Yes, yeah, I agree. It was just what they wanted to do with the character, and it just didn't work for me. So it might work for other people. For me, totally a swing and a miss as far as what you know, Helena, whatever the hell her name
Or
is.
Wombat. Call her
Character.
Wombat.
Wombat, yes, thank you, Wombat, yes. It's gonna bring moving forward.
So so just moving forward. So, you know, so obviously Indiana Jones, he meets up with Wombat, and she talks to him about the Dial of Destiny, and they go into the it's like an artifacts room or something.
Yeah,
And
at this college, an artifacts room, sure.
I just think it's so weird that he immediately trusts her, because I get the fact that he's known her since childhood, but
Mhm.
I just think it's so weird that he would just be like, "Oh, so you're interested? Okay, let me take you to the artifacts room and I'll show you exactly where it is." I mean,
I don't know. That didn't bother me as much, but I thought it was just weird that he just kind of has it in there, like this really big piece of like history, and it's just kind of like buried in this place that like some random person could, in theory, just stumble upon if they were like looking for something. Like, it was just odd that it was kind of done like that. That was the part that was weirder to me more than anything else.
and not to mention too, because then Schmidt and his associates, and also the CIA, they happen to stumble upon. Well, they don't really stumble. They follow Elena and Dr. Jones, and there's this huge, I guess you call it a shootout in the
Yes.
artifacts room. What did you think about Schmidt's henchmen? Because one of them just goes crazy and just starts, you know, gunning people down like willy-nilly.
Yeah, and that's the same guy that was in Logan, right? I don't know the actor's name. I apologize.
I know
Like,
he was in that movie. He was in that movie, The Predator. He played the dad.
Yes,
and then,
yeah, he was in that as well. Yes,
and he was also
Yeah.
in Sandman, where he played the Corinthian. You know, the guy with the sunglasses.
Don't know about that, but yes to the other two for sure. So yeah, it was just the henchman was weird, and the CIA felt like a totally unnecessary thing to add, because like the CIA, the girl that's with them later just gets murdered. I'm like, why did the CIA need to even be in this? Like, what was this plot thread that you felt you needed to have in there? Because it doesn't really do anything. Like, you could just, I would rather just have like a bunch of like Germans that have some Nazi sympathy. You know, they just have this like cult of people that they're able to do stuff with. I didn't understand at all why they wanted to bring in the CIA. It really added nothing to the story, and it pretty much got axed off like less than halfway through because the one CIA operative that's with them just gets killed, and then it's totally not important for the rest of the story. So, I mean, that is, to me, a running theme with this. There are a lot of these weird plot threads that don't really have any purpose. So it's like, you know, it's a 2.5 hour long movie. Could this have been a better movie if you got rid of some of that crap? And absolutely, the CIA thing, it made no sense. It had very little actual, you know, discussion with the movie, and it totally should not have been a part of it. I don't know if they're wanting to do more with it, but to me, it totally fell flat, and it was totally useless to the overall story. So,
and also to the explanation they gave. Well, I was also going to say too, because the explanation that they gave really didn't add much to it.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, because remember they're like they told Schmidt, you know, we only tolerated you because you helped get us to the moon, and I'm like, really? Like, are you sure there wasn't anything else in it? Because the CIA was pretty intent on capturing Dr. Jones. I mean, you'd figure there'd be a lot more going on, but no, like all their explanation was, we're only helping you because you help us get to the moon. I'm like, that's a really, really shit explanation.
Yeah, like why? Like, there's so many other things you could do with that, and I think it makes kind of the whole like, I guess, parade chase sequence, right, for Moon Day that they call it, right? To me, that was all just like kind of like fluff. I'm like, okay, cool. There's a parade, you know, and I think this is where a lot of this stuff started to feel more and more fake as it moved on. And I think like after they kind of have like the little sequence in the archive room, right? They take it out to the streets. And like you really start to feel like how things feel cheap, like a lot of CGI is being used. You don't really feel like the characters are really there. And it gets worse in another sequence we'll talk about. But like this is where it just like, God, this just feels so like phony at this stage. So, you know, he's riding around a horse. You have the guy, Boyd Holbrook is his name, so I looked it up while we were discussing it because it's gonna bother me. So the one henchman that is in Wolverine, Boyd Holbrook, so he's like chasing on a motorcycle, another guy's in a car, and they're just speeding through this like parade sequence. I'm like, geez, are you joking with me right now? Like, this is a huge thing. Like, there'd be so many officers around to do something. I just can't even fathom how like this type of stuff happens. And you kind of have this like awkward sequence where, you know, he goes down to the subway and then he's like, you know, kind of like got to like split the tracks to get to the other side to avoid a train or the subway, excuse me. And then, you know, when he's on the other side, now another subway car is coming behind him and he's got to be able to get there. The CIA is at the other entrance for some reason. I'm like, God, this just feels too much. Like, there's just too much nonsense going on. We need to desperately change how this happens. So it was just after having this giant, long, cold opening action sequence, like we get just a little bit of stuff, and then we have this ridiculous parade sequence, which to me was just really over the top.
I mean, they really are trying to emphasize the fact that it's 1969 and we just landed on the moon.
Yes. Well,
I mean,
if you weren't clear about the time frame. Yeah. They pounded at your head so much with everything that's going on.
Not to mention the fact they made it very clear. Oh, it's 1960s. You know what people listened to in the 1960s? The Beatles. So let's play something from the Magical Mystery Tour.
Yep. It is. Yeah.
So after that after that huge gratuitous chase scene that made absolutely no sense, we end up meeting Sala, who is working as a taxi driver now, and Sala helps get Indiana Jones out of the country. Oh, and even before that, don't you think it's kind of weird that Sala would happen to know all this information about Wombat?
Oh yes. Yeah, it was totally like, I mean, like, I can suspend my disbelief that Sala is a very knowledgeable person. He seems like a strong people person, and I think because of that, I could see him maybe having like a bunch of like different resources just because he has good charisma and people would chat stuff with him. But yeah, it was totally bizarre that like he's very knowledgeable about Helena and that they're gonna have this auction of these antiquities at this place. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like how do you know all
Yeah,
this
yeah,
stuff?
exactly. It's like you seem to know these things very, very specifically. So, like,
Yeah, maybe Salah has a side job that he didn't want to disclose in there. Maybe him missing being out there in the desert, like you said. Maybe he was did a little something on the side there as far as black market antiquities. So I don't know, but I mean, there really wasn't any plausible reason for him to have such a great wealth of knowledge for everything that was going on. But I mean, I guess he got to move the story along somehow. So
yeah,
you might as well have Salah explain to us where we got to go next.
but I will say this: in spite of all that, I did enjoy seeing John Rhys Davies back on the
For
screen. I thought
sure.
that I thought that was pretty good. Although there was one scene I took issue with where he's like, "Give them hell, Indiana Jones," and you're like, "Dude, he's being hunted down. Like, do you really want to yell that in an airport terminal right about
Yes,
now?"
yes. And then, of course, they had like that kind of like little like womp womp move moment where like Indy's like crossing through that section and then he almost gets hit by a car. And he's
Mhm.
like, oh, yeah, no, like, this is not reality anymore. So they kind of had that little moment. But yeah, it does feel very forced. I think this is where, we have Germans, we have Sala, like they have references to the old movies. Like you really start to feel the member berries kicking in at this stage because it feels like they're really trying to point at other movies and other sequences that we enjoy from those movies, and it just feels like this is where that kind of starts, especially with Salah. So
I mean, it's being force fed too because every Indiana Jones movie kind of stood on its own. Like, yeah, you
yes,
had occasional callbacks, but it stood on its own. Here, to your point, I mean, it was just one huge member berry fest. It's like,
oh
hey,
yes,
remember this, remember this. I'm like, hey, can you just have this movie stand on its own merits? Because I figured if you took it all away, there's nothing to it. It's just going to collapse. But
yeah.
you know, but it's neither here nor there. So Indiana Jones makes it all the way to Morocco, where he crashes the black market auction. Lee, what did you think about that scene and the whole sequence
It
and the tuk
was
tuk?
so yeah, so we'll talk about the crashing of the party, so to speak. So one, like as he's going in, like we see Teddy for the first time. And do
Mhm.
you recall what Teddy's doing the first time we meet him, Luca?
Honestly, no. Like, but after the scene with the subway, kind of zoned out a little bit because I was like,
So let me
it's
let me
just all
let me
fluff.
share with you, yeah, because this could be important later. So I just want to set the scene for later, and I won't get in much to it. But he's practicing flying a plane. I just want to throw that out there really quick for unknown reasons that may or may not come up later. But he's practicing flying a plane, like he's sitting there chatting with a pilot, and he's flying a plane. So I just want to throw that out there. Now it's not like he's not like on a game or something because remember we're in the
It's in the
the 60s,
60s.
right? So there's not
Yeah.
like, there's not like, anything going on. He's just kind of like doing some type of simulation. So I'm just going to throw that out there. And then you see, Indiana Jones kind of break into the whole sequence with them selling the one part of the artifact. And I kind of have mixed feelings about it because some of it is kind of humorous, but then other things are just kind of really, really dumb and something I don't feel like Indiana Jones would fall for. Like, he's just like kind of sitting there, and there's this like huge argument. I'm like, man, read the room. Like, this is not like people that are sitting there buying things illegally. They're probably got a lot of people there, and they probably have people with guns. Like,
Yeah,
it
they're going to be armed to the
felt
teeth.
yeah, exactly, right. It didn't feel like something that Indiana Jones would do. It felt very out of character. And then there's like kind of the sequence where he's like sitting there and like, cracking his whip around, and then everyone pulls a gun on him. And I'm like, what were you expecting? Like, what do you think what do you think your end game was? That you're gonna go in there and just take it back and people are gonna be okay with this? Like, of course not. They're gonna react to it. And then, he just kind of hits the floor and everyone just shoots at the window behind him. I'm like, in reality, Indiana Jones, that would have been the end of it, right? He would have been dead. Like, that really is what would have happened right there, because like everyone's pointing a gun at him, he would not have lived. But for movie's sake, we kind of continue from there. And then yes, we do have this like really awkward tuck chase sequence. And to me, this is the worst sequence in the movie for me personally.
Right.
It is just like we've already had multiple chase scenes, right? We just got done with the parade chase scene, right? So we have this tuck chase scene, right? And it is just so unbelievably phony. Like I can't tell you how many times like it was so obvious that there was like rear projection issues, the CGI was poor, like it was just so phony. And I'm like, wow, like why did you guys decide to do this? This looks absolutely terrible. So yeah, that whole sequence from beginning to end was just like comically goofy. And it was just so distracting just to see all these elements that you wouldn't expect from a huge budget film to just totally struggle in this action sequence. Like, I didn't get it. I disliked it from beginning to end. It just felt like it was just like a joke. Did you not get the same feel for like just how poorly the whole thing looked from beginning to end?
I mean, I just saw. I mean, I just thought the entire chase scene was unnecessary because,
For sure.
because at least in my mind, I'm like, look, I mean, I get, I get that chase scenes are exciting, but just like with special effects, you want to use them sparingly. You don't want to have like every other scene be a chase sequence. Well, not to mention, not to mention the fact too that there's this one scene where the tuk gets a leak, and Indiana Jones is trying to figure out, well, how am I going to stop it? And he takes Teddy's gum and sticks it in there. I'm like, are you really serious? Like this entire time, like because again, Indiana Jones is a pretty intelligent guy, but I just feel like with that gum scene, I felt like, you know what, maybe it is time for him to just pack it in and just give it all up, because he becomes so desperate, he just takes the gum from a kid's from a kid's mouth and sticks it in there and hopes to God it can get them to the boat to get them to Greece so they can meet. I believe it's like a one-leg diver to find the ship, I believe.
Antonio Banderas?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was, I don't know, that to me, I guess after the whole tuk sequence, that felt more plausible to me. I don't know if it's like because he had such a bizarre moment right before that it makes that seem more forgiving. But yeah, he's just like, oh yeah, it's got this like certain ingredient in it, and it like deals with heat very well, and something. And yes, let's just get to the boat. We got to get to whatever the next part of this scene is. So that's pretty much how I read that scene. They were just like, we got to get there somehow. Let's just get it over with. You got some gum, sure. That fixes the issue. We're gonna get on our ride and get over to meet Antonio. So let's get a move on.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty much my attitude. I'm like, I mean, because at the point there's just so much shit piling on. It's like, what's the simplest thing to to get us from point A to point B? Oh, let's just use gum. So
yep.
So during that time, we learn more about Wombat's story, and Wombat has developed a huge interest in the Dial of Destiny, and we learn more about what it is. Apparently, apparently, the half, they're looking for the other half of it, because Archimedes broke it in half during the siege, and we later learned that the dial is basically there. I think it's to predict time fissures. I'm still not clear about what it does.
Something like that, yes.
But I just wanted to like expand a little bit further. What did you think about the whole exposition on the Dial of Destiny and what it supposedly does?
This is I think this is kind of like that moment that broke me, because it's just such a far-fetched idea, and they kind of explain it like you pointed out, like something about time fissures and stuff, and like this is where I'm just totally out of the movie at this stage, because I'm like, okay, like I can't even really grasp what it is. And then like as you find out, I guess later, and I guess future spoilers and something we're spoilering, that the time fissure only detects this one time so they can meet with Archimedes. So its only purpose is to go one way to this specific time when the Battle of Syracuse is happening, which I guess we'll talk about later. But yeah, it was super, super bizarre. Like, it's just totally nonsensical. And like the whole time I'm also thinking about this stuff, it's like, how is like another plane not accidentally gone through this fissure, right?
Because you think it'd be like the Bermuda Triangle, you know?
Exactly, right? Like, it's just something that exists in our world, in our reality. Like, and it doesn't seem like I said, I don't know. Like, maybe it's out in the middle of nowhere and no plane would cross the path. I don't know, but it's like, it doesn't seem to have any plausible reason for like existing. Like, you just have this like, great butthole in the sky that people are going to be flying through. And it's just like, it just seems so arbitrary for it to be like that. Like, I don't know. The whole thing, it was always going to be a very bizarre premise when you're doing time travel. And like I said, that was really the part that I was like, okay, this is super, super weird now. So I guess we're going to do some time travel, which we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just totally goofy.
Because I mean, like you was because as with previous artifacts in the other Indiana Jones movies, like you would think like the Dial of Destiny would be able to produce some some power or have some sort of like aura about it that can change destiny, but it doesn't really do anything apart from just predict something.
Yeah, it's just a fancy compass.
Yeah,
it's a fancy compass. So
that points you to a time fissure that you have to that you can only find in Sicily and nowhere else. But
yes.
But then that leads us to another chase sequence because this one involving boats this time because Schmidt and his associates are chasing Indiana Jones and they catch them when they're diving into the second shipwreck. And
okay, I need your help on this one.
Okay.
How the hell did they find them out in the middle of the ocean? Did I miss that, or was I if I missed something, please tell me. But how the hell did they find out where they were?
If I understand it correctly, and please keep in mind, there are a lot of elements to that movie that still make me scratch my head. I believe it's because Baz, Wombat tells Indy that Baz met with the diver a few years ago, and the diver managed to locate the wreck, and so that's how they know where it is. So, and remember, Wombat tells Indy that that she's memorized all of her dad's notebooks. Well, the important bits anyway, as she says. So that's how she's able to locate where the shipwreck is. That's the most I can gather from it. Basically, they're just going to the same location that Baz went to years prior. So that's how they know where it is.
Okay, sure. I can deal with that. Whatever. Sure. There's they happen to find this other diver that happened to know where the shipwreck was, and sure, why not? So okay, so that's fine. I can deal with that then. So yeah, so they have this sequence. We have the callback to how Indiana Jones hates snakes, right? Yeah. But this time they're eels. So like he's kind of in the boat and they're diving down. They could only be down there for 3 minutes, and I didn't time it, but I have a feeling they were definitely down there for more than 3 minutes. But
wait, what? I thought it was 30 minutes.
Oh, was it 30? I thought it was something smaller. So okay, well that's fine then. So they have to dive. They have to go down there to find this item. And yes, like you pointed out, they got to do this dive. They run into some eels, and it's just like, oh yeah, they're kind of like snakes, and I guess I don't know why, but Teddy makes that joke on the top, like, oh, they're kind of like snakes, and I'm like, are they? Like, is that what comes to mind when people think about that, or is the only reason it got brought up was because we know Indiana Jones hates snakes, and that's why we want to bring it up? I think it's more the latter. I don't think people think of eels; they think of snakes, but I don't know. I'm not Teddy. So, but yeah, like they go down there to get it, and then the Nazi group comes, boards the boat, and it just was kind of like a weird sequence. And we see the one guy dead, and then Antonio Banderas is like, you know what? I've been in the movie for 5 minutes. I can't take it anymore. And he's like, well, I'm gonna die now. So he gets shot. And then we kind of have this kind of interesting thing. I think this is kind of like sometimes where I enjoy the Helena's character is like, she's kind of like giving them information, but she's kind of plotting things behind the scenes. So I kind of did enjoy this a little bit as far as it goes, because we see her kind of going around, and she's kind of being very kind of like, I guess I'll use the term playful with everybody. So like you could see like people would probably let their guard down with the way she was acting. And then she, grabs the, dynamite, and lights it up so they can escape. And then, luckily the one henchman, he kicks the dynamite down the stairs, because if they kick the dynamite back at them, they're all dead. So I guess kind of convenient that he kicked it down the boat, so it just destroys the boat. And then, Indiana Jones, Helena, and Teddy, short round 2.0, get to jump on the other boat and escape. Yeah, and it was just, like I said, I think that was actually one part where I kind of did like her character. What did you think about that from, everything that Helena did?
I mean, I will admit she is pretty resourceful. Being
Yes.
a thief and everything. Obviously, you have to be able to think quickly on your feet. But but I kind of, I still feel like overall she's just there as filler. Like, she really doesn't fulfill any any meaningful role apart from just being the smart ass in that trio. But that's just me being cynical, as always.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting, because we brought up earlier how like she has an obsession with this, right? So she read like all of her dad notebooks about everything. And it's kind of weird. Like, when I was thinking about that, I kind of thought about in it like kind of what we had with the Holy Grail, right? So it was kind of something similar, where Harrison Ford is trying to find his dad, and his dad has this notebook about the Holy Grail. He spends his whole life for it, and Harrison Ford's kind of like following the tracks of this. And I kind of see that parallel, or I think this is what the movie's trying to do, is give this parallel with Helena, who has something similar. Her father was obsessed with the Dial of Destiny. Now she's trying to fulfill that, maybe not necessarily for the best intentions. They kind of seem to imply that maybe she's not doing it solely for the money. Like, I don't know. They kind of try to like drop that in a little bit, but I kind of thought that they were going with some type of parallel there with how, we saw that with Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail, and now we're seeing with Helena and the Dial of Destiny. Did you happen to catch that, or am I just pulling at straws?
No. You're totally right. And we do see a flashback where we see Indy is telling Baz he's losing his mind, and he's scaring his daughter with this obsession.
Yeah.
And we come to find out that that Indy promised Baz that he would destroy it when he didn't. He just stuffed it away in the archives room at the college. So that's so yeah. I mean, the parallel. I mean the parallels. Yeah. I mean they're definitely there. I just feel like it's just another act of lip service. Hey, you remember this?
Oh, of course, yes.
You remember this? Well, here's a callback.
Yes. No, I agree. And there's many. Don't worry. There's more callbacks to come. So, so they escape on the German boat, right? And then they're going to Sicily, right?
Yeah, they're going to the ear of Dionysus, which is a cave.
Okay. Yes, correct. So this is another sequence, right, that kind of breaks my mind, right? So they're on this boat. They take it to this port, right? Now, the Germans, the Nazis, whatever we want to call them, right? Mm-hmm. So how the hell do they get from where they're at to where they are?
I mean, the Mediterranean is a big place. Even because I was thinking the same thing too. I'm like, that is a tiny ass boat. That boat will only get you, I mean, at most, it'll probably get you maybe 10 miles, and then you're pretty much stuck, like those migrants, today. Sorry.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just another scenario where you have to suspend your belief, because apparently boats back then, even though they were small, they could travel long distances from Greece to Sicily for some weird reason.
Not only that, but what killed me was the Germans, they find them and they're like just like kind of there, right? So Teddy, like, he's being Teddy, he like steals some like some kid's money because he made fun of him. So it's like, oh yeah, I'll steal some money. And then he's just like randomly walking around, and then you just see like Schmidt is just like sitting at the bottom of these steps. And it's almost like
Yeah.
an ambush for Teddy. And I'm like, how the hell could they possibly know any of this stuff is going on? Like, number one, you have to just magically get to the same port, which I'm sure, like on a coastal island like that, like I'm not an expert on geography, but I'm sure there's plenty of ports around. You can't possibly know the right place you're supposed to go to. And then you're trying to tell me that Teddy just randomly stumbles upon them at this moment where they kind of just all seem to be grouped around him. I'm like, this is just too dumb now. Like, sure, I could deal with the fact that, they somehow knew about where the coordinates were for this stupid ship, and they, happen to get there around the same time that they're doing this nonsense. Whatever, fine. Mm-hmm. I will suspend my disbelief for that. But you can't tell me that just because, like, they saw Indiana Jones and crew going one direction, that you just appear at the same damn place. That was just like, okay, this is
that's
too much
too coincidental.
Yeah, deal with it. It's just beyond. It's beyond any rational thought. Like, you made no attempt to really explain how one group just got there. They just teleported, as far as I'm concerned. They just fucking teleported. We're just there now. We're just there where we need to be for the movie to happen.
And Sicily is a big island, and obviously there are a lot of ports. So, I mean, you would think reasonably, like either they're pursuing very closely to where they can see them, or either that, or they're just like trying all these different ports until they find the right one.
Sure, right. I mean, there's a lot of different things, but like, there's no way that to me, this is where like the Nazi group just lost. Like, there's just no way. Like, you can't. There's no like, you did not give them an out or a means to do what they're supposed to do. Right? Like that to me is it. Like, sorry, like your boat was destroyed. I don't know how the hell you even got back over there. I remember seeing like a boat in the background, but I don't think it wasn't the boat that they were on. So like, I don't know. There's just another boat. They just got another boat. They came in, they got there, and all of a sudden they're at the same place. I was just like, God, this is stupid. But yeah, they kidnapped poor Teddy, right? And then I guess this is where we move forward with it. But to me, that's where I was kind of out of it at this stage, but now I'm just totally out of it because I'm just like, this is just too stupid. Like, you can't explain this away in a way that makes any sense. We're just having to totally like turn off our brains to how this group of people just magically finds these people at the same port at the same time. And it was stupid. I couldn't deal with the stage. This is where it totally broke down to me.
Right. Well, I mean, after that, they go to the cave, which is known as the Ear of Dionysus, and from there they stumble into a chamber where they look at the riddle and they figure out, oh, they actually have to use water displacement to get to find an escape.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what do you think about that whole sequence in the cave and after that?
Sure, I was thinking just sure. Like they're just good. I mean, and granted, I mean there is stuff like that. I mean, we look back to when he was going through the trials trying to get the Holy Grail, and you got like the little saw, and then you got the Bridge of Faith, which is you just have to kind of walk forward, you don't see the bridge, and then there's all this kind of like random stuff. So it didn't really bother me that much. It seemed weird to me. Like, I guess they knew when they were trying to find this cave. I mean, they knew generally where to go, but then like they started like doing like echoes, because like wherever it like I guess echoed the loudest is where they need to go. So like they have a means of finding it, but then of course the Germans are going to also be behind them, and then they don't really know this, but they still find the same place. So I'm like, okay, I guess they're just going to find it, whatever. So yeah, and then I can't imagine that they could catch up to them too fast. Like, I know Harrison Ford is not, he's like pushing 80, so we have to kind of give him a little bit of a break. But I mean, it's not exactly like the German group looks like they're a bunch of people, like especially Mads Mikkelsen. They don't exactly look like to be in peak physical shape, so I don't know how they kind of eventually caught up to them really quick. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of was like, whatever, sure. So, you displaced water, whatever, and then you go down there. And then you have kind of this. I think this is where they go through that cave with the bugs.
Yeah, the centipedes. Yeah.
Did that ring any bells for you? Did you taste a little bit of member berries in that moment?
I mean, I mean, at this point, I'm just rubbing my head and banging it against the table. I'm like, why are you doing this? Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's just like,
this isn't. I mean, this isn't the callback in a good way. This is like, I mean, this is being force fed member berries to the point where
yes.
you're about to vomit. Because I'm
Yeah,
like,
it's just
dude,
like,
I'm like, dude, just stop it with this. All right, we get it. It's an Indiana Jones movie. You don't need to keep reminding us about that.
yeah, it was just such a random thing to include. I'm like, why? Of course, there's bugs, and the only rational reason there's bugs is because, oh yeah, remember when remember in Temple of Doom where we got to sit there, go through the whole sequence. Like, I was just like, okay, whatever. So, but yeah, they go there and they find Archimedes' tomb, right?
And he's wearing a watch, by the
And
way.
yes, he's wearing a watch, and Helena happens to notice that, like, on, I think it was a phoenix or something, there's like propeller wings, and I was like, okay, like, I mean, I knew what they were going for at that stage, but I'm like maybe it was just like a design, like, I mean, it doesn't, it's just kind of like, and I mean, like, I guess if you look at it, it might look like that, but I don't know, it's just like propellers to me don't exactly, like, they're not exactly like a unique design. So I don't know. I felt like they're kind of stretching it, but obviously him having the watch was a very obvious clue that, there's clearly going to be a time travel element in there. And then, yeah, so that's where the Nazis finally catch up to the Indy team. And then they kind of have this altercation where Indy gets shot.
Mm-hmm.
And my whole thing with the sequence was like, I felt like he got shot and then it never really came up again. It was just like, he's just like sitting there. I mean, like, he kind of got shot, like, kind of, to me, it wasn't like really high on the shoulder. It wasn't like a graze or something. Like, he definitely got like shot, right?
I mean, like, so, it'd be serious. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Like something where, I could certainly believe like he's probably not going to die right away, but you probably need to do something for him. So, so he gets shot. And I will admit that I think this is one of the parts where, I think Helena starts to really come around to it. Like, you could see that she's upset that he shot. And I think that, like, over the course of this, like, she's really started to kind of build that bond with Indiana Jones. Like, you really start to fill out this stage. And, like, I could sense that, like, before she was doing it for her own good graces, and then she kind of, be able to be with Indiana Jones, I think kind of gave her a little bit more of that, like, something that she's been missing for a long time, with everything that happened to her own dad. So I did kind of like that. That's one positive I will point out, was kind of how they dealt with it. But yeah, it's just like Indy gets shot and then they just kind of move on, and it doesn't seem to impact them, like, until the very end of the movie. But it just, like, it felt so weird how that transpires. So now Indy's been captured, and now you have Helena and Teddy that have to follow after them.
Yeah, and we come to find out that Schmidt's intentions is to go back to 1939, kill Hitler, and basically run the war more efficiently. But then Indy comes to figure out, oh, turns out Archimedes didn't really account for continental shifts, so really it's a one-way ticket to 213 BC. And no other time. And the plane, well, the two planes, because Teddy somehow figures out how to fly that plane.
Right, let's just take a moment. Let's take a moment with this, okay? So, yeah, so we have this sequence, right, where, so they're, before they even take off, right? So you have, the Nazi group leaving on the plane, right? And like you pointed out, they fully divulge that, yes, we're going back, in time. And yes, like, Mads Mikkelsen or Dr. Ball or Schmidt, whoever you want to call him, he decides, you know what? I could do this better than that Hitler dude. What does he know? I'm going to go back and kill him, and I'm going to be the main person now. So that's the rationale. So I'm like, okay, sure, whatever, fine. Let's just end this already. So you have Helena in the pouring rain, right? Like she's just driving down on a motorcycle on this, I'm sure, extremely wet runway. And I'm just like, are you serious right now? Like, there ain't no way. Like, you can't. Number one, you're not going to get that close to the plane. Number two, like, that rain has to be, like, it was coming down. Like, it's like, I couldn't even imagine her be able to control that for that long. And then she just kind of, like, jumps off and grabs onto the leg of one of the planes as it's, like, coming up. And then you have Teddy, right? So let's go back to earlier when we talked about how we first met Teddy and that he was practicing being a pilot. So obviously, you know, you've never driven a plane before, but now guess what? You're fully capable of doing so. And I just totally, my eyes, I think I saw my brain for a little bit because my eyes had to roll all the way in the back of my skull. Like, they were all the way back there. Like, this is like, you know, at a certain stage, it's just like, okay, you're just wanting to kill your audience right now. Like, you don't have any faith in us to, like, do anything. Like, you just want us to totally just accept what we're witnessing. I'm like, that's not good writing. This is not good storytelling. You can't justify it. And what to me was even weirder was that the pilot is just sleeping in the back this whole time. And I'm like,
he is Italian, so
of course, right? And maybe he's drunk. I mean, who knows? Like, I mean, I have to try to make sense of this, how this dude in the back of this plane somehow didn't hear his plane starting, going up in the air with all this turbulence, and like the guy is just knocked out the whole time. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, really? Like, what are you doing right now? Like, this is totally batshit crazy storytelling, because you know what you could have done? You could have just had, like, you know, maybe Teddy threatens him, right? And even though that's weird, right? But just maybe Teddy threatens him, like, you got to follow that plane, or I'm going to stab you, or I have a gun and I'm going to shoot you, right?
Or maybe Teddy,
like,
Teddy would have crawled into the, you know, German plane himself, and, you know.
Sure, yeah, we could have done that too. But like, as I said, if we want to have this 2-plane sequence, right? Whatever, right? So here's what they should have done, right? So you have this pilot, right, that Teddy's sitting there doing. And let's say, like, when they're flying in, or if they want to do something, like maybe the pilot gets injured and Teddy has to help out, right? So something small, but like, at least I could be like, okay, well, Teddy might have a little bit of idea of what to do, so I can suspend my disbelief. But you can't convince me he's just going to fly a damn plane.
I mean, he flew it pretty well too.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's a pro pilot at this stage. I was just like, oh my god, he's just flying this plane. I'm like, no, you don't do that if you're in the movie, right? You have a pilot back there for some damn reason. I don't even understand why you include the pilot now, because like, it didn't seem like it really mattered. If you're gonna have Teddy fly the plane perfectly in there, you might as well just have him fucking land it too. Like, I just don't even understand why you bother including the pilot if you're already gonna have Teddy breaking any type of tension that anything's really gonna happen to anybody here. Like, it just made zero sense. I didn't understand it all. I don't get why, if you're gonna have Teddy fly, there should be no pilot with them. If the pilot's with them, then you shouldn't have Teddy fly, or you should have Teddy play a minor role. Don't do Teddy just flies, and then I guess he just, like, you know, kind of like, you know, it's like, okay, well, I flew in, I'll have the pilot fly us back out. And I'm like, no, this is stupid. I can't deal with this anymore. You're totally off the deep end with this.
Yeah, they pretty much jumped the shark at that point.
Yes, the shark jumped severely.
I was gonna say, like, if they hadn't jumped it before, they've jumped it at that point, because
they flew the megalodon, as far as I'm concerned with that.
So going back to the chase sequence, because we have to have another one with 2 planes now, because we had one with the train, we had one with the tuk-tuk, we had one with the horse and motorcycle, we had one with boats, and now we have one with planes. They fly the plane through the time fissure to, I think, either 212 or 213 BC, to the siege of Syracuse, where they are attacked by Roman ships. Lee, what did you think of the whole sequence of them flying right into the middle of the siege?
I just, my brain at that stage, I was mush. Like, it was just so unbelievably stupid. Like, everything at that stage, it was just like, this is not even a movie anymore. It's a comedy show. Like, nothing, there's literally nobody makes any rational thought after that sequence. It's over, right? So number one, you have these, you know, Nazi people. They're flying a plane. I don't know why you're getting that close to everything. Like, why the hell are you doing that? It seems pretty quickly that they figure out, like, hey, we're not where we're supposed to be. So it's like, why the hell would you even be that close to begin with? And then there's,
Right.
all this altercation. And then what killed me was you start to see, like, the Nazi soldiers, they just start firing at fucking ships. I'm like, what are you doing right now? Like, what is this purpose? You're not going to do anything. You're just shooting at random people that literally have no technology, and you're just randomly shooting at them like that's going to do something. Why don't you just move your plane somewhere else where it's not in the middle of this giant conflict? Like, it's just like everyone just all of a sudden just took stupid pills, and like everyone just like decides, you know what, I'm not going to be rational anymore. We're just going to open the door, or I'm just going to smash the cockpit window and just start trying to shoot at a bunch of troops. I'm like, this is stupid. Like, who's going to do this? No rational person. I'm not going to go through time. And my first instinct would be, I'm just going to unload my weapons at a bunch of random people, right? Like, I need to have this for survival, not so I could just shoot at random people that probably can't even hit my plane. I realized that they did a few times, which, like I said, seems kind of far-fetched, that they have the capabilities of hitting a moving plane like that. But regardless, even if they did, like, you're not doing anything. You're just wasting your ammo trying to shoot shit. And it was so stupid. It was like nonsensical. I'm like, what am I watching right now? This is not like, I don't know what you're wanting to do at this stage, but like, you've totally taken the piss out of this movie at this stage because we're just doing whatever. I just absolutely was stupid. Everything from that sequence forward was absolutely mind-numbingly dumb.
I mean, they also seem to forget that the Romans, they actually knew what they were doing in terms of weaponry. I mean, that's how they built an empire. So it's not like they're going to war against a bunch of cavemen. I mean, yes, they are primitive weapons, compared to airplanes and machine guns. But the Romans built some pretty decent weapons. They did have a pretty disciplined military. It's not like they were going against, completely ignorant people.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, and I agree with you. I definitely don't want it to seem like they stood no chance. It's just like you're in a plane, right? You got this very clear height advantage. It's like you just don't bother with the altercation. Like, you're not going to do anything. You're literally like four guys in a plane, and you're just like opening fire on like ships that are spread all over the place. It just, like I said, it was just totally nonsensical. Like, no one that has an IQ in the double digits could do anything like that.
I mean, you think Schmidt would be, would be the wisest of them all, even though he's a Nazi.
For sure.
But apparently he drank the Kool-Aid too, and then he's starting to like go batshit crazy all over the plane.
Yeah,
and you're like,
oh, I'm gonna fly the plane now or some shit.
I mean, and so when the plane crashes, there's a bit of satisfaction because you're like, thank God that's over with. But it gets even dumber because because Wombat tries to do something, obviously a callback to the cold opening, and then Indy tries to jump out with his parachute, and then Schmidt tries to stop them, and then then Wombat shoots him, and then they jump out of the plane and they land where they meet with Archimedes. And can I just say, I just think it's a bit weird that Archimedes would be like, oh wait, there's a plane in the sky, I must go and check it out, even though there's a huge siege going on, and the Romans, at any time could breach the walls and and capture me. In real life, Archimedes was captured and killed by the Romans, so it's not like he was going to be captured and paraded around. They were going to kill him because he was the guy who was building all these machines that were, causing havoc, in their lives. But what did you think about that encounter with Archimedes and the whole reason as to why he built the dial to begin with?
I mean, like I said, at that stage, it was, I don't know if I could make any type of rational understanding of anything that's going on, because it almost felt like it didn't even, like, it almost felt like there was some type of paradox there where, like, Archimedes didn't really build the dial like he was trying to, with the dial was there, and, the dial was specifically created just so they could interact in that one time point, right? That's how I understood the dial. The dial was only supposed to get them to that place at that point in time. That was it.
Right.
So to me, it was just a very bizarre thing because I'm like, okay, that's really weird. Doesn't make any sense. Don't understand how any of this is operating, but whatever. When you deal with time travel, you do have to kind of just go with the flow, so to speak. But like the whole time, it's just like, you have Indiana Jones there, right? And he's talking about how he wants to stay. And initially, right, I'd be like, okay, that's actually kind of okay. Like if he did that, it wouldn't bother me that much because, he's a big archaeologist. And this is like, something that's really important to him, which, like I said, never came up in any of the other movies, but I guess the Siege of Syracuse is like his living dream is to see this, right? So they totally just throw that in there as a reason for him wanting to stay. And I can understand that a little bit, right? I can understand that just a little bit. But what I can never get over is the fact that, guess what? Indiana Jones is shot, right? And like the movie just kind of like tries its best to forget about it. It does get brought up here at the end, but it's like the dude's shot, okay? He can't stay there. Like it doesn't matter how much he enjoys that place. If all he wants to do is die, well, then that's a very unsatisfying way for Indiana Jones to go out, right? To me, that's not how you do it. Like you can't have a shot. Now, if he was in perfect condition and like there had to be a choice between who they save, hey, I'm fine with that, right? Indiana Jones stays. He gets to live out history or whatever we want to say, and that's his last hurrah. I'm cool with that, right? You can't have him shot because he's just going to die in a few days, if he even makes it a day, and he's just going to die, and that's the end of it. And that's not, I don't think, any way the audience wants to see Indiana Jones go, at least for me personally. So I just thought the whole interaction was really weird. And like I said, even though I kind of understood why Indiana Jones might want to do that, the story has not created a scenario where he could really do that because he's just going to die there. So,
Right.
I just didn't like that. It didn't feel like much of a choice. And I'm like, well, I guess Helena having to punch him out is going to make the most sense. Like, even though it's time sensitive, I guess like the pilot went out and tried to like help, carry dead weight up there because like you got Helena. I mean, I guess maybe some of Archimedes people could have helped out too, but it's like you have kind of this thing where it's like, oh, we got to rush, we got to get there. You knock them out. Somehow someone has to get them up to the plane. So, but I guess they get out, and it's just weird how that's like all glossed over. It's like, well, we punch him out in the past, and then he just kind of wakes up at his apartment again.
Yeah, and that leads us to the end of the movie where he and Marion reunite. What you think about that sequence? Because I mean, because for me, I kind of felt like at that point I'm like, well, I'm just so checked out by the movie. Like, yeah, let's throw in Marion, to see if that brings people back. It didn't for me. I was just like, no, I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm sorry.
It felt totally unearned, right? So it was totally unearned in that sequence. It didn't make it made absolutely no sense. It's implied that like I guess Helena had contacted Marion, and they were able to chat with her, and then I don't know. I guess just fix shit. Like I have no idea. Like as far as I know, Marion's been out of the picture for a while, but I guess like getting a call from Helena somehow resolves it. I have no idea. It felt totally unwarranted. There was nothing to me that really justified them getting back together other than we wanted to have kind of this nice sappy ending, which, like I said, it is what it is, if that's the way that you want to do things. But it was just like, it didn't feel like it made sense with everything in the story. We've not even seen Marion other than like a picture. I think he covers up on the fridge. Like there's like, we get like that they're not together, but like, we don't really know a whole lot about it. Like we know obviously, Mutt was killed during the war, and there was some stuff that happened there. So like we do kind of get some, little sprinkles of it throughout the story. But to me, you can't really warrant her getting back together with Indy because we don't really know enough about what was going on. And certainly I don't believe that Helena would be able to resolve whatever type of conflict, whatever type of marital conflict they're having. It just felt like a really sappy way to close things out. And it's just like, to me, they just chose all the wrong things what to do with Indiana Jones, especially at the
So you'd be happy if they never made another Indiana Jones movie after that, right?
I would have been happy if they didn't make an Indiana Jones movie after the third one. Crystal Skull was total overkill. And like I said, it was pretty poorly received, if I remember right. So the fact that they decided to do another one was mind-boggling to me. And as I said, it just was not warranted. Harrison Ford is too old. He was too old in Crystal Skull. And, to me, you have this nice send-off, right? How did the third one end, right? You have this nice send-off where he saves the dad, and you have the dad, you have Sala, and then I forget who the other one was. That was with them, right? So they all kind of like literally ride off into the sunset. That's literally what they do, right? You literally have them riding off in the sunset. So I'm like, okay, that's an appropriate way to end it. And then they're like, no, let's do the Crystal Skull. I'm like, wow, this is really lame. Like, this is, nonsensical. Like, sure, you bring back Marion. It's like, okay, that's cool, I guess. And then you go through all that. And I mean, like, even Indiana Jones makes fun of he's too old for this shit at this stage. And then it's like, fast forward 15 years. Oh, let's do another one. We need a fifth one because we didn't really bleed it dead with the Crystal Skull. Let's do the Dial of Destiny. So, yes, Indiana Jones needs to be done, right? Harrison Ford needs to be done. You need to be done with the Indiana Jones character. It's done. End it. Stop doing more. We don't need a prequel. We don't need a sequel. We don't need anything else in the universe. Indiana Jones was fun for what he was able to do. Those first three movies, and I use that loosely because they weren't all spectacular. The one with Short Round I wasn't a huge fan of, but like for the most part, it was fine, right? Now it's just like you're totally bleeding this poor guy dead. So they need to not do anything else with it. Indiana Jones has run his course. I enjoy Harrison Ford. I think did a great job with what he had available to him, and to me, end it. We're done with Indiana Jones. Turn the page. Find some other stupid series you want to milk.
So, what's your overall score for this movie then?
So initially, I would say this. I was initially kind of on the higher end of the spectrum. As I watched it again, I saw how quickly it deteriorated. I would probably give this maybe a 2.2 out of 5. It didn't really do a whole lot. Like I said, I enjoyed the first sequence for what it was, even if it's a little bit over the top. But it did still feel good. But then it was just like chase sequence after chase sequence after chase sequence after chase. It's like, sorry, like there's only so much I could deal with. And then the whole like Dial of Destiny thing and all that stuff, to me, fully not warranted. There were so many different ways to do it. You could have had him like kind of something similar. Remember on the Holy Grail, he kind of had to make a choice between grabbing the Grail or having his life saved. And he was, constantly trying to get the Grail. You see Elsa like falls down because she's trying to get it. And then, when the roles are swapped, his father's trying to save him. And then you have this like really good moment where, the dad like just is like, Indiana, like let it go. And like, to me, that was a really cool moment because, we kind of just let the Grail die, right? To me, that's what they should have done with the Dial of Destiny. Should have done something similar where, it's like, oh, this is a portal to the past and we have a chance to do something with it. But, there's other things. There's just so many different things that they should have done with this. But yeah, I think 2.2 is being fairly generous with it. It had some elements that worked, but most of them didn't. I think Helena, she started off as someone I wasn't a huge fan of. She kind of grew on me through the story, I have to say. But even though she grew on me, to go from like a 0 to like a 4 or 5 is not exactly a huge ringing endorsement. But I think they had a lot of different avenues they can go with, and they just chose the wrong situation on multiple occasions.
I mean, I'm going to go 1 out of 5 on this one.
Holy shit.
I did not like this movie at all. I mean, there were certain parts of the movies where I literally just got up and went to go do something else because I just couldn't take it. I mean, obviously the big one were the chase sequences. I felt like they just decided, every other scene we're just going to put in a chase sequence and we're going to make it as long as possible and we're going to fill it with, inane dialogue because we just need to fill some time up. I felt Indiana Jones was not at his peak. This is not the Indiana Jones I remember, and that's not how I want to remember him, as an old decrepit man who gets a cake from the archaeology faculty at Hunter College. I felt that the villains, even though the actor Mads Mikkelsen did a phenomenal job with it, I felt he was one-dimensional. I felt like there weren't too many things about him that that made me care about why he was doing what he did, other than the fact that he just wanted the dial because he was a Nazi. Helena, I remember I texted you about this a few days ago. There was nothing about her that I liked, even though there were flashes where she was trying to be quote unquote human to try to show that she was more than just a thief. Overall, I just felt like she was just too much of a smartass. She's pretty much falling into the archetype of the sassy thief who's out for themselves, but tries to show that there's a bit of humanity to them, but they want you to remember that they're a thief. Grace from Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning is a good example right there. And I just felt like the Dial of Destiny really didn't do anything apart from, like you said, just be a glorified compass that directed you to some time fissure that was in Sicily that took you to one period in time in one place to do, well, absolutely nothing unless you're a fan of Greek and Roman history. So that's my overall score for the Dial of Destiny.
Brutal, absolutely brutal.
Hey, I mean, I call it as I see it. So
yeah. Now I will say just one, I guess, kind of final thing that I was thinking about as we talked about this. We didn't really talk about in the review, but I think that there were some times where I definitely felt like they were trying with the Indiana Jones character. I don't think it succeeded very well, but like there was times where, like, when he talked about how his son had died during the war and how it kind of crippled his relationship with Marion, like, there were times where I was like, dang, like Harrison Ford is really selling this part. So even though most of the writing, the storytelling, and everything else seemed to fail, I think the times where Harrison Ford actually had anything to work off of, I definitely felt some strength with it. Now, there are plenty of parts where it didn't work out because of, I feel like either a mixture of Harrison Ford or the storytelling, but there were a few highlights for me kind of sprinkled in there. But once again, it was very, very few and far. So, but yeah, it's overall, would not suggest it. Like, even if you're a diehard Indiana Jones fan, I mean, just enjoy the first three, right? I didn't like Crystal Skull. I didn't like this. I just think that this doesn't really do anything for the legacy of Indiana.
Well, that's going to do it for our review of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. If you guys liked the movie or hated it, let us know in the comments below. And as always, remember to like, comment, subscribe. And thank you so much for watching if you're watching it on YouTube, or listening if you're on Spotify. And we'll catch you on the next review. Take it easy.